901 with Shaman from Choices.
Or Charlie.
What's that?
Or Charlie.
Nobody
Just
knows
so that
who
way.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, you want it on the record of
Yeah,
the camera?
as Charlie.
Okay. Sorry, Charlie.
You want to sign that? That's real.
Oh, okay. So yes, we have the designation of earmarked alcohol tax money choices counseling.
And, you know, Western Montana Addiction Services, Stephanie Quick does the prevention out here, so I would propose that they still keep that and do that. And Stephanie does a great job out here, and
So remind me what the amount is that gets
it's about $9,800 a year.
divided by four payments.
Yeah.
And so out of the 9,800, you're saying a portion of it goes to Western Montana Addiction?
No, they get their own prevention monies, so Choices gets about $9,800. I don't know what WeMass gets for prevention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but
Just curious, but does DPHHS require you to account for like the money?
oh yeah.
So I mean, even though there's HIPAA or whatever, you have to say so much was spent on Jim Jones for.
Not like that. So what I have to do is, and I just finished it, is every year I have to turn over all of our expenses and all of our income. So however much money Choices spent, you know, to keep the place open, how much did we give away for, you know, treatment, and then any income we received from insurances, from the county, those kinds of things. But no, we don't. And I guess we do account for it in a way that we use the substance abuse management system. So we put all of our clients into that, and then the state has access to all of those records.
What happened when the 9,800 is depleted?
It's
And
gone.
Dusty Dayshaw says this guy needs treatment.
We still we figure out ways. There's you know, everybody's under this Obamacare. You know, everybody gets their insurance through the marketplace. So most people are covered by insurance some way or another. However, insurances and Medicaid, or even like the AMDD block grant money that we get, doesn't cover people who are incarcerated. So people that are incarcerated, if they need you know, if Boone calls and they say, hey, we need you to come over and do a CD eval on this guy, then we come over and we do a CD eval on him, and we use that alcohol tax monies to cover the cost for that.
Because the insurance doesn't.
Because insurance
already
doesn't. Yeah, and that's if DOC, if they're not in jail under a DOC commit, or whatchamacallit, Kurt Kurtzilla, what is he?
Public
defenders. If public defenders won't cover it. And, you know, there's so many cuts now across the board from all of those agencies that it's getting less and less that they're paying for evaluations. So $9,800 doesn't go very far.
Yeah.
So with the forms you got here, this one here's got.
This came already. I didn't bring this. Casey received the email too. And this already comes checked, because these are the only two programs in your county at this time.
What about this next page where nothing is checked?
I don't have that one.
Oh.
I think that this is the way it is now, and I think the form that you're holding might be the way that you want it to be going forward. So you might have to put the X's in there.
Oh, okay.
Is yours blank, Roman?
Yes.
Yeah,
Same little matrix bracket, but blank
yeah.
with the,
So you would put an X
So
in.
this is, this one here where the two are checked.
This is the way it
Western Montana
is.
actually gets some also?
Some prevention dollars, yeah.
Okay.
Outside of the 9,800,
thought-
I'm not sure what they get.
Okay. I thought
do
at
we
one
need to-
time we had given choices for change.
yeah, I thought we gave it all the
100%.
choices for one time, but.
You guys did, but then there was a year where we weren't able to do prevention just because it was just Nancy.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, really, I think it's, you know, Stephanie just has so much more access to different programs. I think it's in the county's best interest to leave it with her doing, with her doing it. She does a great job.
Do we need to designate an amount on here?
No, because it varies depending on the number of liquor sales,
Oh.
beer taxes,
Oh.
wine tax. You know, so sometimes like last year, it was a little bit more than 9,800, not last year, the year before, it was more than 9,800. I think it was like 10.5.
Don't they use any of that money at all for like little
But-
schemes and bar checks for law enforcement?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if Boone gets access to some of his own or not for that. I don't know.
But on this one form here, it asks for a percentage.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage are we going to give choices for change and what percentage are we going to give Western Montana?
So it would be 100% for outpatient and then 100%
Oh, I
for
see.
prevention.
Okay.
And we don't have like residential homes or inpatient or detox in our county. You know, and in this year, so in July of 2017, there was a legal opinion that was obtained from the state. And it used to be that when you got a DUI, you were 100% responsible for the
ACT program.
for the ACT program, which included the assessment, the class, and the treatment. Well, in July, a legal opinion came out that said no, insurance, including Medicaid, will cover the evaluation portion. And if you are mandated to go on to a treatment because you either found to be chemically dependent or you received an aggravated DUI or it's your second or subsequent DUI, you do not have to take the class, you just go right on into treatment. But if it's your first DUI and you're found to be misuse or moderate, you don't have to go on to treatment, you just have to take the class. They kind of flipped it around on us. So those changes took place in July of last year.
So of the county funds allocated, all of them from that fund,
Mhm.
is it already separated out between treatment and prevention? Or do we need to go 50% of our allocated funds go to prevention and the other 50% go to the outpatient?
No, the state already allocates that.
They already have it
Yep,
separated.
so you would just do 100% for outpatient for choices and 100% for prevention for Western Montana Addiction Services.
All right, Dale, did you have any questions? I see you're down here.
So, this is a totally new program, the alcohol tax money, that you haven't applied for that in the past.
Oh, no, we have. This is I think our 5th year.
It's like a renewal thing.
It's a renewal every year.
Oh, you have to do it every year?
Yeah, mhm.
Okay, so you've had it for the last,
5 years, I think,
at
I
least
believe
5
so.
years.
Yeah.
so you say 100% outpatient?
Mhm.
You would pay for that, like $70 per hour or whatever?
Yeah, but that's if they are indigent, so we have a sliding fee scale. So somebody who's indigent can come in, and if they have no other form of payment, such as like a DOC, because we have a contract with DOC or OPD or Department of Family Services, or, you know, mostly it's for incarcerated peoples. because we can't really access any funds if they're incarcerated. And so that's what we spent the majority on this last year.
So if somebody comes in as moderate or severe, they're not incarcerated, they still will be eligible for some of this funds?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
If they're,
Well, and they would also be eligible for the block grant money that we get.
what is that?
The block grant money is a grant that I have to write every year, and it's based off of need. So if we have, like this last year, we only spent of that block grant money like $2,500 of the $20,000 that we were allotted. But because everybody's covered under insurance, there's no reason to use that money.
But if they aren't covered?
I've yet to find anybody who isn't covered under insurance or DOC or OPD that we, like I said, we've only used like $2,500 of that block grant money.
I know that 9,800 doesn't go very far.
No, and that's, the $9,800 is the alcohol tax money. The block grant money is the grant that's given from the Addictive and Mental Disorders Division out of Helena.
When you're talking about prevention, you're talking about the assessment and the ACT class? Or?
No, prevention is like going to the schools and talking to the kids, or billboards, and I think Stephanie did,
The
like,
posters and the store.
yeah, the posters and the pill drop box and all of those things that Stephanie does.
So when you're talking liquor sales, is that just liquor sales in Mineral County, or is that a percentage of statewide liquor sales?
Mineral County.
Just Mineral County?
Liquor sales, beer tax, wine tax, liquor licenses, all of that is.
And that's 20%, is that 20% of the alcohol tax collected in that county is what applies to what you guys can get?
Mm-hmm. Which is quite a bit for a
So
population
you
of.
just have approval from the commissioners?
Yeah, so the commissioners are over that fund, and so they have the authority to choose who gets those monies.
Did Jim throw his thing away? Or whatever Dale wanted. Give one to Dale. You have a lot of questions, Dale, and it references the codes and everything about how we have to allocate this money.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was talking to Nancy just the other day about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Is that Joel?
Yep,
He's back.
yeah.
He's here Tuesday.
It's feeling good.
On our last audit, which we just had a couple of weeks ago, we received 98%.
Cool.
So, according to the auditor, we're doing what we're supposed to. And, I feel like, Nancy is probably the hardest working human in the county. She puts in over 100 hours a week. She'll never retire. She'll work. One day we'll just go to work and she'll just have died. I mean, she's very committed to this. It's something that she takes very seriously. She starts seeing people as early as 3 o'clock in the morning. We have people that come from Texas, Florida, all over the place who are trying to get, whether they came here over the summer and they got a DUI or, something happened and, they fly back to see us. She will never, ever get a return on investment of what she's invested into that business, ever. And we employ 5 locals. Our one therapist comes out of Missoula, and for custody reasons, she has to stay in Missoula. But she did look at buying a house. We would like to hire another full-time therapist. We're we're that busy. Nancy cranks out probably between her and Leanne anywhere between 5 and 15 CD evals every week, and those evals take 2.5 to 3 hours to write. She's very committed to being here, and you know, like I said, the $9,800 doesn't go very far, but I think we put it to good use, and you know, we work closely with the courts, and
Better than not having it.
that's right. It is way better than not having it, especially because we do have a transient population that we are required to help when they come through our county.
And we get a lot of people that come in, well, not a lot, but that have like the first DUI and they're found to be moderate or severe, and the first thing they say is that they can't afford the classes.
Mm-hmm.
Who's having a heart or whatever, they just can't afford to do that. So this is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to echo what you said, there probably isn't a harder working person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anybody that gets up that early in the morning
No.
and does it the next day and the next day.
Yeah. In the wintertime, she worries me because she'll leave at midnight or 1 o'clock and come down here, and there she sits, and there's not a soul on the road except for maybe workers that are getting off at the mill and coming, you know, to and from, and she's just very passionate about what she does.
I get emails from her at 5 in the morning.
Yeah, I get emails from her about 1, and I yell at her. So what she does now, she holds mine until she's gonna, so that way I don't yell at her. You know, she's gonna be, let's see, she'll kill me, but I think she's 78 this year. Yeah.
Okay. Any more dialogue, or should we move forward with the decision here?
I would make a motion that we do the designation of the earmarked alcohol tax money for Choices Counseling.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor of the motion to select the service provider designation, which was Choices for Counseling being the outpatient and Western Montana being the preventative service provider?
Mhm.
Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And tell Nancy thank you.
I will. She took a vacation, which
Somebody
was
told me that. I couldn't
wasn't
believe it.
really a vacation, because she ended up having to write a court report for somebody, and so she worked Monday and Tuesday on that, and then Wednesday she worked on a couple of CD evals because, you know, attorneys were waiting for them, so she got that done. So yesterday I tried not to call her. I didn't even tell her about this because I didn't want her to come down and
I think we're just lucky to have an addiction counselor in Montana, Pennsylvania, in Middle County.
Was this your pen, Carol?
yeah. Thanks, Dwayne.
I think there's probably one other counties that, you know, Montana are probably don't even have, you know, the first closest one might be 90 miles away or something.
Yeah. And, you know, the way that the funding is this year, it's going to be really scary to see what happens to places like Western Montana Addiction Services. You know, if it weren't for Nancy, who works so many hours, I mean, she doesn't get paid for nearly as much as she works. But those places like Western Montana Addiction Services, which are important, they're going to be, I think, hurting with some of these funding cuts. And that's
Yeah, I
really
think
sad,
so, too.
you know, for the mental health and the
And
CD issues.
They're not gonna be the only ones hurting. The people that they're helping are also gonna be hurting.
Yeah, it's really a bad deal. So if you know people,
That have, you know, DUI or whatever, their license might be suspended, so if they have the closest place is Missoula or Thompson Falls, how do they get there?
Yeah,
Mhm.
they gotta break the law, they go to their mandated class.
Mhm. Well, mental health services in general are being attacked by, you know, funding cuts. And I mean, Roman, you know, from dealing with people in the community when you were in law enforcement, that most of the issues you dealt with were people who had mental health issues or chemical dependency issues, and what's going to
And then,
happen
yeah.
when they cut all that funding? What's going to happen to all of those people?
Yeah.
It's just going to make our jails fuller,
Then
which is
you'll
going
have
to put
no
us.
problem in jail, because some of those people, like you say, they can't even that's too stressful for them when they have a mental problem already.
Yeah, and then it puts the burden back on the counties, and the counties don't have any money. You know, so
More officers are living under a bridge and then looking for keys in the car, the castles to drive away in.
yeah, right. When are you guys? Who do I talk to, and when do you guys talk about like the jail budget and stuff? Because we should talk with Boone about getting an understanding of, you know, and coming up with some kind of a price for when he does have to have people come and do involuntaries, or, you know, you have somebody that needs a mental health evaluation or whatever. Ronnie, Boone,
Ronnie,
Yeah.
probably.
Ronnie.
Well,
Okay.
and yeah, and they sometimes broker that kind of deal on their own, like with the hospital. If it's an inmate at the jail, then they give like a 15% reduction for the county government entity, so they don't have to pay full fare.
Yeah. I want to get on the same page, so that way when they get a bill, then they're not shocked. And and I was going to give them some time to kind of get everything moving, but. All right, well, thank you guys.
All right.
Thank you. So, we have Mary Furlong here. I was waiting for you. We got 10 o'clock. On the agenda here is the Great Burn WSA draft executive order. Stan Spencer called and wanted to know if he would be interested in hearing about his plan or idea. Do you want to talk a little bit? Yeah, you come on up. This table is open to everybody who wants to hear better or see better.
Well, first off, it's not restricted to the Great Burn. This would apply to all, both Forest Service and BLM lands. And I'll just give you a little bit of background, I guess. My counterpart in Idaho, Sandra Mitchell, and I have been working on these land issues for many years, and we decided to just take this as individuals. It's not a group sponsoring our efforts. So we just consider ourselves as kind of a coalition of backcountry recreationalists, and that's how other groups are supporting us. So I'll probably just go through this a little bit of, I guess, background. Region 1 of the Forest Service manages RWA's recommended wilderness area. And if I use acronyms and you guys are going, hey, what's he talking about, just raise your hand. And WSA's wilderness study areas, manage them as wilderness, which is not consistent with the other regions in the U.S. So that was a primary objective of this, is to bring Region 1 or all regions with a consistent management plan of study areas, which I'll kind of refer to these two as study areas. And you know, we've visited with the Forest Service, collaborated, litigated, and so what we found is at a lot of the, I guess I would say at the forest supervisor level, kind of understand what would make sense, but the ideology that filters down from both Region 1 in Missoula and from Washington, D.C. is pretty much managing backcountry as non-motorized. So the Forest Service policy is an administrative function. It's not a legislative function. So that's why we decided to basically take the problem to the head decision maker in the United States, the President of the United States. So the EO, and I'll call it the executive order, would not go directly to the President. It has to go to the Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of Interior, because we have both BLM and Forest Service lands involved. And again, the only fundamental change in this, even though it's 3 pages at the end of the day, is really that decisions that the Forest Service would make in Region 1 have to be a specified finding rather than a subjective finding. That's how these areas get closed to motorized. It comes under the umbrella of social values, which is part of the planning rule, and they have to, you know, they have to follow the planning rule, but that's become a real wild card. What is a social value? So that's what we're asking. There's a specific finding. Yeah, if I'm a snowmobiler, so if snowmobilers are impairing the wilderness character, and there's a specific finding, I'm willing to listen to that. But a subjective finding that it might be, or it could be, or possibly might be down the road, that's what bothers us to no end. So further to that, we've actually circulated this executive order around Washington, D.C. to various people and other groups. Secretary Zinke has actually seen it and acknowledged. I would say, let's just say he liked it without going into his specific comments at this particular point. And you know, at the end of the day, we may not, they may not recommend to the president to sign this, but we would really hope that they would recommend to their own agencies to make decisions on specifics rather than subjective findings. So, and at the end of the day, secretaries could come back and say, you know, would you change this or that, or we don't know at this particular point. The liaison between the Forest Service and the Department of Agriculture has seen this and also likes it, and as he's actually volunteered, and I say volunteered because we did not ask him to do this. He came to us and said, if you need help with me walking this through to the Secretary of Agriculture, I'll be happy to do it, because again, Secretary Zinke understands things in the West. Secretary Perdue, I don't think it would have a grip on the land issues that we have in the West. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory manner. He's got a lot on his plate, and I've met some other people in the forest segment from the Southeast, and when you start mentioning RWAs and WSAs, it's kind of a deer in the headlight look. So anyhow, we have some other offers of help at some high levels, to work this through. So it's not a radical move. It's just asking that the findings be specific, not subjective at the end of the day, and that Region 1 would manage recommended or study areas in line with the other regions.
So there are some regions that don't have as much subjective policy making in there?
All of them.
Really? So
Region 1 stands alone in its management of study areas.
Hmm.
And there's maybe a little side note. When the planning rules came out in 2012, were first proposed, as you know, Tom Tidwell came up through Region 1, and so the planning rules were, the first draft was that all regions would manage study areas as wilderness, and there was tremendous public pushback throughout the United States. So the rules got amended to read that they need, the study areas, the uses need to protect the social and ecological values. And so the first question I'm sure comes to your minds, came to my mind, what are social values? And but that's been, I guess, the dynamic that's been used by Region 1, in that motorized may conflict with other users' perception of a wilderness value. We've of course asked the question, we're snowmobiling, there's nobody else up there. How are we impairing it? And the answer we get back is, it conflicts with their social value. So,
Even though they're not present at the time?
oh yes, yeah.
So if a tree falls in the woods, they might hear it.
Yeah, God, I've used that analogy a lot.
And so this executive order, you said it would go to the president, but it would actually also go to,
Well, it has to go. It has to go to each secretary of one of the Interior and Ag, for them to recommend it to the president. Is the flow that it goes. A few people have said, it's kind of an audacious undertaking, but at the end of the day, sometimes you have to do these things, to get people's attention.
well, are the ARMs and the latitude in decision-making at Region 1 just such that nobody finds it surprising that the same government agency has different ways of perceiving the rules?
That's the eighth world wonder, quite frankly. We can't get a grip on why you would have divergent management policies. You would think they would all be consistent. I don't have the answer for that. I could speculate all day long, but I do not have the answer for that. It's most peculiar, to say the least.
So you sent me on the email, and the secretary wasn't able to print it off, but do you have in its written form what the document looks like?
Yes, I do.
Intended to have it printed, but it didn't work on the computer, so.
So, I gave her one, I have two more. And actually, this one, you will note there's a couple of sentences that are underlined, and there were some minor changes. The mountain bike community wants to support it, but they were, I had a little concern with the language that might be ambiguous, so we made a couple of very minor changes just in the last couple of days.
And I understand you've kind of already bantered this document about with other government agencies.
Yeah, we're moving right along. I can't give you the exact number. I believe we have 4 counties in Idaho that are supporting it right now, and we have 2 other counties in Montana. I guess like the proposition, it's not on their agenda yet. Basically, we're discussing it with, I guess, counties that have study areas in their county. We're not just not flock shooting it everywhere. So people would understand that. And then a lot of statewide organizations are supporting it, all the way from, I guess, Utah, California, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana. All of all those states I just mentioned, the state snowmobile associations have all supported it, which is a pretty big representation of users. I don't have the exact number, but it's very substantial. And the bicycle people, it looks like some real large numbers. Now that we made these changes, seem to be happy with that. Their attorney was happy, so I presume they're going to be happy.
Have you run this by Senator Daines and
Yes,
their offices?
it's an administrative issue rather than a legislative issue, but I have just have hand-delivered it and discussed it with both Senator Daines and Congressman Gene Forte. So I guess what I would say, they're kind of like Secretary Zinke. They like it. It's a little out of their, it'll be out of their purview as far as any decision making, but they definitely are on board with the thought process.
Can I ask a question?
You betcha.
So are you proposing that the WSA up there be done away with, or just access for snowmobilers in that area?
Actually, either one. All we're asking for is that the decision to restrict, let me back up. The draft executive order would allow uses that were in place at time of designation. So if snowmobiling were allowed, it would allow snowmobiling unless there's a specified finding that snowmobiling is detrimental to the social and ecological values. So the bottom line is what I mentioned earlier. We're just asking that they be a specified finding rather than a subjective finding.
Yeah, I understand that part. I was just wondering if part of that was to do away with that study area.
No.
Okay. And then the other thing, does it include other motorized vehicles like motorcycles and four-wheelers?
Yeah, it specifies uses that were in place at the time of designation. But in anticipation of your next question, if it were, well, let's just say a four-wheeler that's tearing up the country, they can make a specified finding isn't hard to come up with on that. It's detrimental to
It
them.
leaves a scar or erosion or what have you.
Yeah, so, yeah, I guess we're not trying to say, let's just go Katie bar the door and get with the program. It's just uses that would not impair the values.
That's why I wonder if the bicycle thing is gonna be a problem for you, because then there might be other users in the wilderness study area experiencing what they thought would be quietness, and then they see a bicycle.
You know, I think that's, one of the discussions that kind of goes on. So what you have to come down to in this is what would the specified finding be rather than the subjective finding. There's actually been the Ninth Circuit Court ruled in October of this year, and I don't have the specific language in front of me, but it was on another matter in Oregon between winter users and snowmobilers. And oddly enough, they were trying to prevent a parking lot for snowmobiles. And when it wound up in the Ninth Circuit Court on appeal, and they put a footnote in there that the Forest Service does not have to consider user conflict under the NEPA process because they are citizens' subjective experiences. Now, that's the first time the Ninth Circuit has, I guess, come up and put it in black and white when it wasn't ambiguous. Now, is that the end all? I don't think so. I'm probably going out on a limb here, but if I would say if a mountain biker's careening down the road and he's running over backpackers, that's a pretty specific finding that we need to put a stop to that. But I probably shouldn't speak to that. I guess specific.
But like you said, at the time of designation, if a bicycle was allowed, then it should be.
Yes.
Unless it was causing some kind of identifiable harm or damage to the terrain.
Exactly, that's the way we see it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But aren't all things that come out of human beings subjective?
I'm not sure I understand your question, your point there.
Well, if I don't like the noise out in the area, you can find that specifically that I don't like it, but is it subjective or specific?
Well, if you go back to the Ninth Court, if you don't like a noise, they're saying that's a citizen's subjective experience. Basically, you don't like it, I don't like it, but the Forest Service doesn't have to make a ruling one way or the other on it. That's exactly what they said.
The whole experience of being out in the woods for everybody is subjective, and it's probably different for everybody.
Exactly, and that's what the Ninth Circuit said, yeah.
Mhm.
And I shouldn't be speaking on behalf of the Ninth Circuit, because I'm certainly not an attorney.
Hey, John?
Yeah, I want to better understand your comment about what uses were in place at the time. Does that mean simply that they were permitted, or does it mean that it was actually being used that way? And if it's the latter, how do you identify what uses were going on 30 years ago?
Would probably be in their forest plan. I mean,
Well, that's what's permitted.
Mhm.
But then the question is, well, if it was permitted, but nobody was actually, or there was very limited four-wheeler use or snowmobile, I mean, things have changed a lot in 30 or 40 years. I happen to have a Honda Trail 90 that was probably old enough to have been used at that time frame, but they were a lot different than what you see in the woods today.
But what he's pointing out, though, is so with the designation of a wilderness study area, even though a Honda 90 may have been allowed at the time, they have the ability to identify that it's going to cause some damage to the wilderness study area if it was to become actual wilderness. In the case of the snowmobile stand saying they drive on 15 feet of snow, they aren't the same machine as a four-wheeler or a motorcycle. So that makes it different in that light.
It does, but what this does is really substantially shifts the burden, in the sense of rather than Forest Service personnel sitting there and actually usually this happens with more than just Forest Service personnel. There's usually a whole consortium of people sit down and work it out, including people like you invited to the table, other than just an executive order that comes down on high. But if you need the objective standard, rather than Forest Service personnel or a consortium sitting down and saying, you know, we think the noise of a dirt bike would be bothersome to the backpackers, they have to go out and document that they're in fact causing a problem, which means manpower, it means time, it means expense, which makes it a lot less likely to happen. And it changes very much the burden of determining what's going to happen there.
Actually, I'm actually trying to find the language in here, and I know it's here, but I'm missing it right now. But it really doesn't, I wouldn't say it changes the burden. It might change the burden in Region 1, but it makes the burden consistent with all the rest of the regions in the U.S. And that's our objective, that all regions are managed the same.
Yeah.
My concern is, I'm fine with snowmobiles, actually. It's wintertime and there's not a lot of other people up there.
Boy, Mark, for you.
I live on Trout Creek Road and they go up and down all the time, so, but I would be concerned that it would open the door for four-wheelers, and I've seen the damage they can do, and I have a four-wheeler, but I drive mine on roads. I mean, you know, mountain roads, but, and motorcycles, and plus the fact that they're used during the time when there's a whole lot more people out using the woods. So, I don't know if that's exclusive.
As far as the summer use, if there's an impairment to the wilderness character, that would be a specific finding, and they would not be allowed, the way it's worded. It really was a lot of language to get down to the point that Region 1 basically, I guess, followed the spirit of the planning rules, rather than using this overall blanket of a social value basically means non-motorized. And number two, consistency with the other regions. But back to the other question, as far as I'll find it. But it does specify the uses that were in place at time of designation, and we would mean, I think I could say that it would mean uses that were allowed, not illegal uses.
And I have, I guess I'd like to see what those uses were. Would be really
Well,
helpful.
Each forest and each
Right.
WSA would be different.
Right.
What was allowed. There may be some that didn't allow snowmobiles. I'm not aware of that, but it's quite possible.
No, there was a lot more snowmobiling back then.
Oh, yeah, there were a lot more motorcycling too.
Yeah. And I would have a problem with a motorcycle going along the state line of the lakes.
You know,
Well, he's not saying that all uses that were allowed 30 years ago would blanket be allowed now. Only those that don't show harm to the wilderness character on the terrain.
Yeah.
So,
So how do they determine that?
well, there's all kinds of studies that a motorcycle causes rutting and erosion. They've already established that. I don't think there'd be any debate about that.
No, I would have to say not. On the other hand, if there was no impairment to the wilderness character, they'd be allowed. You raise a good question. How do they make that determination? It moves the determination today. Basically, it kind of works like this. We don't like motorized. I'm speaking of the Forest Service. We don't like motorized, so let's just shut it down, and we'll say that it conflicts with social values. And quite frankly, I've had that discussion off and on the record with different Forest Service people, and that's kind of what it comes down to. And so they make it subjectively. Basically, the Forest Service would have to go out there and say, look, it's causing ruts, whatever the issue might be. So we actually know it's a problem, so we're going to shut it down. And that's really all we're asking.
I'm sorry, but the Forest Service has actually spent a lot of money and worked on some pretty extensive projects up the West End in the last few years to extend trails and things for motorized. And I mean, there's that warming shelter up there, there's the extension of the rail trail. I don't think it's fair to sit there and say we don't like motorized.
But I'm talking about the study areas.
Yeah, I understand that, but you're talking about them in the context of saying the Forest Service doesn't like motorized, therefore, and I don't think that's a fair characterization.
Well, let me add in the backcountry.
Yes, ma'am.
Has any consideration been given to the noise level factors in the winter with snowmobiles and the impact on the animals?
Well, I could spend all afternoon talking about that. There's been a lot of discussion about it. There's been zero evidence. There's a lot, it might be, it could be. We've had all kinds of discussions through the years. The big one we got into was the mountain goats. And they don't winter where we snowmobile. Of course, the elk, the big game are not up where we snowmobile. As far as in the summer, I think that would come back under the specified finding. If noise were a determining detriment, they would have to come to that conclusion. But it doesn't allow them to say, we think it bothers them, so let's just shut it down just in case. That's where we're moving towards.
Yes, sir.
Roman, I'm Bert Limler, and I'd like to bring up a couple of points if I might. First, because there's a background discussion of wilderness study areas, I want to make a real clear distinction that a wilderness study area and a recommended wilderness are different. Wilderness study areas, particularly the ones in the Gianforte and Danes bills, require congressional action to change their boundaries, for instance. There must be congressional action. Recommended wilderness, such as the Great Burn, which is a Forest Service recommended wilderness in Mineral County and adjoining Idaho counties, is established by the forest plan. Forest plans are now decades old for both the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest in Idaho and the Lolo National Forest here in Mineral County. Those plans are either being revised in Idaho or they're going to be revised within the next year or two here in Montana. There is quite a history of discussion as to whether snowmobiling is or is not allowed in the Great Burn recommended wilderness. Montana side, this discussion went on at some length. At one point, the city of Superior got involved in a lawsuit based on my conversations with folks and lost, along with the Montana Snowmobile Association, basically arguing that the Forest Service cannot prohibit snowmobiling in the Great Burn. On the Idaho side, there was a recent change in their travel plan, and that was appealed by the snowmobile groups and others. And the Forest Service was again found to have the right to prohibit snowmobiling in the Great Burn recommended wilderness. So I think the legal issues have been battled out pretty thoroughly in the courts, and the Forest Service came out on top for whatever reason. I would argue that the county, snowmobilers, others interested in snowmobiling in the Great Burn should follow the public process that's going to begin in the next year or two when forest planning will decide the future of Mineral County's recommended wilderness, the Great Burn. There are no Wilderness Study Act areas in Mineral County. They really aren't even real close. And so I would just encourage you to consider that there has been a legal battle over whether in fact the Forest Service can prohibit snowmobiling in recommended wilderness. The battles have been lost and by the snowmobiling side, and things could certainly change in the near future through a public process of forest plan revision, which will begin before too very long.
Well, Bert, what do you make of the point? I haven't studied it, know myself, but Stan says that the biases that are involved in the administrative differences in Region 1 and other forests.
So the one thing I would say is, these issues have gone. That issue was part of the lawsuit against the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest, arguing they had improperly prohibited snowmobiling and without knowing the details of the suit, other motorized recreation. That suit was lost. That's basically, really the only point. Now, I would bring out a couple of points that are going to be challenging for administrators trying to administer this executive order, which I've not seen. So I would love to have a copy of it. Will I be given one, Stan, either by email or in print here?
Yeah, it's public knowledge.
Thank
It's not
you.
an under the radar type thing.
Well, I just assumed if we're discussing it, it'd be kind of a little bit above the radar. So let's say that I don't know what's in it, but let's say that I know there are two key issues that come up when you discuss historic use. So the first issue that I think is going to be really important is what is meant by date of designation. In this case, the recommended wilderness that's close at hand is not designated. It's administratively identified. And that administrative action took place in 1986 when the forest plan identified the Great Burn recommended wilderness and identified management in recommended wilderness, which was not to include motorized use. So that would be, to my mind, the date we're talking about. That's quite a few decades ago. It's really hard to, Forest Service does not have records of how many people were snowmobiling in the Great Burn in 1986.
Yeah, they
Like,
do.
not particularly good records. So there may be a picture of someone on a snowmobile with Pilot Peak in the background or another identifiable object, but what level of use does that represent? Because I believe that level of use could be an issue. I don't know if it is in this particular executive order, but if it is, then you need to identify not only that one person was there, but how many people were there? What was the level of use at this time, rather than allowing that use to increase in the future, even though you're trying to protect wilderness character? So I think there are two key issues: what dates are talked about, and then if the dates are decades and decades and decades ago, what records are we relying on to establish use, and how do we know what the level of use is? If we know that level, how would we ever prevent it from increasing? What sort of administrative procedures could the Forest Service use to say that we had 20,000 visits in 1986, and we're never going to allow that to go over 20,000 because that would be changing the character of the land?
Yeah, could I respond?
You bet.
You're kind of moving into the weeds into forest planning rather than the actual executive order. But let me come back on the lawsuit. We didn't lose that lawsuit. We had a settlement, if you recall, and the Forest Service had to redo the forest plan. And they redid the forest plan verbatim, which is open to another lawsuit if you want to go the circle. So we actually prevailed on that. But which I don't think is really neither here nor there. I said study areas as a common denominator between WSAs and RWAs. This applies to BLM land as well as Forest Service land. I understand the Montana Wilderness, or the Montana Wilderness Study Act, which is a congressional action, but the BLM ones are outside of that. Excuse me if I wasn't clear on that, but I just use that as a common denominator for areas that are being studied for inclusion into the national wilderness system. As far as the date that it was considered an RWA or a WSA outside the Montana Wilderness Study Act, that would be the date, and we aren't going into that aspect of how many were there or weren't there, just the uses that were allowed at that point. And if they specifically impair the environment, they would not be allowed under this executive order, I guess is the way I would sum it up.
Yes, sir.
I'm a little perplexed. You're saying, in essence, Region 1 is somehow out of sync with other regions. But I haven't heard anything to indicate that the other regions may be more out of sync with Region 1. I mean, what is it that you're, evidentiary-wise, I haven't heard anything to indicate that there needs to be a change because of Region 1 being out of sync versus the other regions being out of sync with Region 1.
Well, if you look at the other, let's use Region 4, which butts up to Region 1. They allow uses that existed at the time of designation as long as they don't impair the wilderness character. Region 1 is the only region that does not work under that same premise.
But who determines what is detrimental? You said you want something specific rather than subjective. Who makes that determination?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, ma'am.
Is it the Forest Service that makes that determination
Yes.
between specific and subjective?
Yes. Yeah. Right now they have the latitude to be subjective. Under this, we're asking them to have a specific finding. And yeah, the Forest Service manages these areas, so, yeah. Well, the Forest Service manages their lands, the BLM manages their lands. But, and quite frankly, the BLM is not nearly as restrictive on uses for the most part. We just thought it was, we took the consistency further. If you got a WSA and BLM land or Forest Service land, it probably makes sense that they get managed the same at the end of the day.
Yes, sir.
So why do you use the subjective in the same sentence as the word specific? Subjective is not measurable, objective is measurable. Those are two words, but they mean two different things. But you're using the word specific. I mean, you can make specific findings, but those findings have to be objectively verifiable. Subjective are not independently verifiable. Can you explain why you use those two, use specific findings versus objective and subjective?
You actually answered the question. That's what is the point I'm trying to make. Is the findings for uses should be based on specific analysis rather than subjective analysis, and you summed it up very, very well.
I think he's asking about the distinguishing the term specific versus objective. He's wondering why you use specific and not objective.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said objective, I thought you said subjective.
He did. He said subjective,
Oh.
objective, and specific.
That's just the language that, I guess, a specific finding, I guess we felt was more specific than using the word objective. Quite frankly, I'm not even sure we had that discussion.
Yeah, and I think that raises a good point. Using the term specific is going to require a specific study for every area in order to reach a finding.
As it should. As it should.
Well, and that's going to mean basically opening stuff up because they don't have the budget to do specific analysis for every area.
But I think you're probably using that term because that's kind of the common term that the Forest Service currently uses. They talk about a specific finding related to the bull trout or a specific finding of the Fish, Wildlife and Service. They usually don't say the word objective when they're describing their findings. But
And that could well be. This was actually drafted by a retired Forest Service official.
This executive order?
Yes. And in conjunction with our attorney, but he did 90% of the work.
Diane?
I hate to beat a dead horse, but I'm still really concerned about if four-wheelers and motorcycles, other motorized vehicles would be allowed along with this, and if so, would you have to do a study to exclude those? I don't know if I'm saying that right, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I do. And it's a fair point. I think at the end of the day, the Forest Service just has to sit there and say, yes, this is impairing ecological values of the area, or it is not impairing the ecological.
So each area, they would have to go through that process?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, they did
So it
it.
would be understood that they could use it until the Forest Service says no? Or somebody
That-
challenges it and the Forest Service says no?
Yeah, I guess we see it almost in the reverse, that it would not open until the Forest Service did their analysis. There's not a set implementation date in this.
I guess I would rather see it just specifically used for snowmobiles, what you're doing, because opening it for other use is unlimited. And I know it would be limited if they decided it would be limited, but
So
getting to that point.
I'm a snowmobiler, so I'm in the same camp as you are. I actually had this discussion with my counterpart, and but at the end of the day, we decided that, all the uses should be in the pot together, and then what has to get thrown out has to get thrown out. Yeah, being a snowmobiler, and I'm not a summer user, motorized user, yeah, I would have been quite happy with that myself.
That doesn't mean these guys have to decide it that way. And, you know, some of you may know that I first came to Mineral County as a campground host for 3 years in Trap Creek Campground, which is the foot of the hill for people going up and using that area. And I think you guys need to think about what your real role is, and that's what's best for Mineral County. A lot of the people that I saw in that campground over the summer came for the purpose of using State Line Trail and going into Heart Lake and things like that. That was a major attractant. And I think you need to be very careful that you're not going to change the character of that area to the extent that you don't continue to draw that segment of the recreational user. It's not...
Which segment?
The segment that wants to go into the wilderness areas, that wants to hike into Trout Creek. Some of them would come in Friday night, stay at the campground, hike in, stay Saturday night, and either go State Line and drop down around, or go up the Heart Lake Trail and stay around Heart Lake Saturday night, come back in, and maybe go home Sunday, maybe stop at the campground again Sunday and go home Monday. But we got a lot of, there were, I would say, 2 major pieces of traffic that we got into that campground on a regular basis. One was people using the State Line Trail south into the Great Burn. Sometimes we got people that were starting out off of Fish Creek. They'd hike up through and then stop at the Trout Creek campground and go on from there. Camp Bighorn used to do that every year. They'd take trips, and after they'd hit the Trout Creek campground, they'd change gear and be on the river the next day or something like that.
And then when winter comes, those folks you're describing leave, and the same amount of volume and traffic comes to the Big Sky from Washington and Idaho and goes up to the same area you're describing for the exact same purposes, for the serenity and the beauty, and they're not butting heads with the hikers because they're not there.
Well, I agree, and if this was only limited to snowmobiling, I think we'd be having a different conversation here. That's not what it is, and you need to remember that. Because the gentleman here presenting it as a snowmobiler, and he's talking mostly about snowmobiler, you don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is all uses, all motorized uses right now. I think it'd be a very different decision if it was just snowmobiling.
Well, I think what way I'm understanding is it's all the uses at the time of the designation, but taking into consideration if there are negative impacts to the terrain and the wilderness ability. So I find it hard to believe that they would be letting four-wheelers and motorcycles up, because they've done tons and tons of data describing why they're shutting and locking gates based on that very same analysis. So I don't know why they would allow that.
I think it would be allowed until it was challenged.
That's what it sounds like, and the question
I think it
again,
would be
there's that-
disallowed until it was proven otherwise.
There's that specific terminology. That's not what it says. It says go back unless the Forest Service comes up with a specific finding. So and again, we haven't had the opportunity to read it, but to have a specific finding sounds to me like it's likely to be site specific. So they would have to do a study in the specific site before they close it. You need to take a good hard look at what those words mean.
Yeah, I haven't been able to really look at the document either. We have it today, not even as an action item, but I'm interested in all the discussion, and if we do decide
What are some of the specific complaints about snowmobiles? I have no idea.
I don't understand it.
Other than the noise, if you could suddenly reduce it from 100 decibels to 5, would you have the same considerations?
No. This is kind of a subjective answer, but if you read the record of decision in any of the forest plans in probably since 2011, it basically boils down to that the non-motorized users don't like motorized uses, period, so therefore we probably should just shut them down. They're never, the noise or there's never been a specific issue brought up about snowmobiles in particular. It's more of a subjective answer all the time.
I'm not objecting to the snowmobiles, but I don't think that's very accurate. You'll notice that in Yellowstone, they have done a number of different things to address some of those issues. To go into Yellowstone Park, it has to be a 4-cycle snowmobile. It's not a gas oil mix, so that you don't have that issue. And along with the 4-cycle, there's a noise reduction issue. So there have been, and again, I'm not objecting to snowmobiles in this context, but there are differences. And there are ways to address some of those things too.
But again, you're talking about Yellowstone, we're talking about the study areas specific. Those are the backcountry areas that, you know, have the interest.
Well, I think there's some concerns about wildlife issues. And again, I'm not against snowmobiles up there either, but I have heard that, the effects on wildlife, including mice.
Yes, Bert?
Roman, I just want to say that there is a 5-year study that was recently completed in Idaho and Wyoming of winter recreation areas. And the people using the recreation areas were radio collared. And, you know, they'd wake up a little drugged, but, well, maybe they didn't call them. They had them voluntarily put the GPS in their backpack. The Wolverines wouldn't voluntarily do it, so they did drug the Wolverines. So now they've got drainages with Wolverines that are radio collared, skiers who are carrying backpacks with GPS units, snowmobilers who are carrying GPS units in their side pack or wherever they carry it. And they have thousands upon thousands of data points. Here's the Wolverine, here's the skier, here's the Wolverine, here's the snowmobiler. And what they found a whole lot of things, but one of the things they found is that female Wolverines were very sensitive to disturbance. The males, which tend to cover more ground, were not as sensitive. And of the things that most concerned the female Wolverines, motorized recreation was right at the top. So there are wildlife issues. They, in some cases, are very well documented. And this is the only case I know where that level of documentation exists. But there are wildlife issues, and so I just point out that there is at least one very serious study pointing out the challenges of keeping Wolverines and winter recreationists in the same landscape.
Actually, I'd like to comment on that. I've seen part of that study. Wolverines actually were a lot more disturbed by cross-country skiers than they were by snowmobilers. That was quite an interesting finding. The Idaho State Snowmobile Association actually funded the study on the Payette National Forest. And we didn't know what the outcome would be. There was this subjective discussion, so we thought, you know, when I say we helped some funding, but the ISA basically put it together and, you know, we need to get to the bottom of it. And that was an interesting finding. I guess I don't want to go into the Wolverine discussion. I grew up in northern British Columbia, a lot of experience with Wolverines, but I won't go there.
So Steve, is it too late to just get back to the snowmobile use in that?
You know, the secretaries may come back to us and say, that's what we want to do. We don't know. I'll be real candid with you. We almost thought about doing 2 orders, one for winter use and one for summer use. We thought it might get confusing. Again, with one of the secretaries not being familiar with, you know, the Western land issues. But I think all of those things are kind of on the table. We just thought we ought to probably do a collective deal. What we didn't want to get into is work a deal with for the snowmobile, and then the bicycle people come up and, you know, say, well, wait a minute. It put the secretaries in a very compromising position. So I think if it gets brought to them with a whole bundle and they want to sort it out, we would rather they did it than we did it, I guess.
So are bicycles restricted to motorized use areas only now?
Yes.
They're not allowed in a wilderness area because it's a mechanical, has a cog and a sprocket
Oh,
and a
okay,
chain.
I didn't know that. So they're not allowed on the Heart Lake Trail then, would they be?
No.
No, but I guess the main thing about what stands, that, you know, like we said, we have the debate about the Wolverines and all that. The one thing that really drives me bananas is the bias thing. I mean, like you pointed out, John, Yellowstone. I mean, that's a prime example where, to me, it seems like a bias is being strongly apparent when the National Park Service will brag to no end about 3 million visitors coming through the park in the summertime. That's basically 1 million visitors a month, but yet be so worried that a snowmobile that goes on the very same damn road through the park, they're not allowed off the road, that they have to be restricted to only 700 machines with a 4-stroke engine. So to me, it's like, why are we so happy about all the people and motorhomes and motorcycles in the summer, but we are deathly afraid and aghast that 700 snowmobiles with 4-stroke engines might harm the wildlife? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that seems really inconsistent to me.
Well, maybe it has a little something to do with the ability of wildlife to move around in the summer versus the ability to move around in the winter when the snow's 8 feet deep.
And I'm wondering about.
I've been there in the winter and,
Breeding too, maybe.
you know,
What?
So,
I mean,
yeah, I don't know what it is. It just seems kind of like weird to me that as congested as the park is in the summer, we don't have the same level of concern as when it comes to something that people don't maybe like a.
It's all about money. It's basically what it boils down to. You bring 3 million of anything in and they're talking dollars.
Well, actually, even that goes counterproductive, because they sure chased a lot of business out of Yellowstone in the
Yeah.
wintertime.
Yeah,
That's true.
but, yeah, well, we have about 5 more minutes, so if anybody, bullshit, do you have anything to comment on before we wrap it up?
You know, like they say wildlife, I've been there for 40 years, I've never seen any wildlife.
Sir, you had your hand up too?
Yeah, I've been in the summer and the winter both up in here, and live in Arley, but we get down this direction quite a bit. And you know, the wildlife thing, we see going up Fish Creek to go up on the top, and we used to go into Kid Lake and such. You know, we'd see all the deer and elk were down low on the road, and then about parking lot area they started thinning out, and you know, we'd see some rabbit tracks up top, and we did see Wolverine track once, and they followed the old snowmobile trails up and down the ridges. So, you know, and that's good for them, and you know, maybe that was what they were up to. But wildlife wise, you know, we don't want to go to these areas with the snowmobiles until there's 4 or 5 feet of snow. And at that point, the big game and the stuff we're, you know, usually seeing is already down in the low country. The flip side of that is, my brother lives in the bottom of Fish Creek, and you know, in the summertime you get the 4-wheel traffic on some of the roads. Well, maybe a lot of the game would move back to the high country, and we don't need motorized use in the high country in the summertime. And that's where we've kind of, if it was an easy fix to split that up and, you know, leave a couple months in the fall for hunting season where nobody goes with motors, and a couple in the spring when they're calving and there's nobody's in there with motors at all, you know, that might be the ideal fix. But to get that implemented and to get the Forest Service and Fish and Game and everybody to get that in line is, you know, above and beyond, just like Stan said, trying to split this into bicycles and snowmobiles and all this type of thing. It's beyond our time frame and probably expertise. That's what some of the Forest Service people are, you know, hired to do. That's what they should be doing. And you know, if we can give them maybe we need to give them the free rein to do those kind of decisions. And whether it's a recommendation that's what, you know, if you guys do or anybody else. But, you know, summertime use, we've been in there, and again, I'd be favor of being in on foot, you know, Cedar Log Lakes, and not be run over with 4-wheelers just like anybody else would, so.
And like you said about hunting season too.
Yeah,
That's
it's,
last
you
year
know,
Olympics.
there's people don't want to be stepping in horse poop on the trails too, but you know, we're gonna have to compromise, and there's enough country and there's enough different uses. And, you know, we talk about 700 sleds and snowmobiles in Yellowstone in a day or whatever it is, you know, you don't get that many in a season up here. So the use is different numbers for sure, but if we start doing some of this closing areas, we're gonna see 700 sleds in a day in one area, wherever it is it's open.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna have you know, the congestion's gonna be in one spot instead of everybody spreading out and, you know, do you even notice it type thing.
And you came late, sir. What's your name for the record?
Matt Wetzel.
Wetzel from Marley. Thanks for the comments. Yeah. John?
Yeah, Stan commented that after we had the discussion of the difference between winter and summer, that it's possible the secretaries could send it back and say it needs to be split up that way and looked at differently. It's also possible you guys can do that and say, hey, we don't want to sign on to one that doesn't treat those differently. So it doesn't have to wait for the secretaries for that distinction to be made.
Yeah. Well, before we close, you know, we commissioners, we aren't necessarily all about motors and snowmobiles, but we just have Mineral County to be concerned with. A lot of it is this recommended wilderness that Kurt pointed out is, it's not a WSA, but recommended. Then we have inventoried road lists and we have road lists. And like Matt pointed out, in our county, really the only area where they can snowmobile is on this west end where the Taft and the warming hut is. So this pink is all the Fish and Game's wilderness management area, which means no chainsaws and no motorized use there. Butting up against the Great Burn, butting up against inventoried road lists and road lists. So we just want to see, nothing against wilderness or recommend it, we just want to see maybe one more, not here again. We need some opportunity to diversify our poor little economy of 7% private land in this county. 82% Forest Service, 9 actually going on 10 with the state with their Fish and Game and DNRC land, Weyerhaeuser 1%. So we have very little. And I remember I came to a meeting in this very room in 1994 when our sawmill shut down at Diamond, and Chuck Wild was the forest supervisor at that time. This was 94, so this was, you know, 8 years or so after after the forest plan of '86 came out, and he felt horrible that we were losing a big part of our economy. And I think Ron Dove was here too, and he encouraged us to focus on, it was a drop in the bucket, he knew it, but at least we still had some beautiful backcountry that offered Black Diamond premium snowmobiling. He said, look at your motel over there, it's full of people from Washington and Idaho. I know it's not the same as logging, but you guys need to take advantage of your diverse economy. You have great hunting and fishing in the summer, you got beautiful snowmobiling in the winter, and all I can say is we're losing opportunities every day to sustain a county which needs services for the people that do come here. All those people that come up to Heart Lake and hike, they might need a cop one day, and our sheriff won't have any manpower because we don't have any revenue. And people are going to have services that they expect to be funded, but if we can't offer a little bit of opportunity other than just hiking, we're really going to be in trouble here.
But Roman, I don't think I'm not hearing anybody really argue against the snowmobiles. And, you know, they go, like I said, up and down Trout Creek Road all the time, and I'm glad to see that. They must be going over into
I just didn't want
Idaho
anyone to
mostly.
get the impression that we're all for snowmobiling. We're all for
Yes.
diverse economy and all users being welcome to the
And that's
county.
what we have to look at.
Yeah.
But the concern is the other one just
Mhm.
seems to be here.
So, I just wanted to say that in closing because we have another meeting here. And unless anybody else had a last minute comment, don't want to cut anybody off. Mr. Dove, Rusty Parkin? Bullshit.
If you look on that snowmobile use map, we're locked out of everything, all the way from Lolo Pass to Rawhide to the top of Hoodoo, which there's just a little corridor there. But then you look, the Sheep Mountain area, it's all locked up all the way to Dry Creek. You know, we really don't have anywhere to go.
So like I said, this is not an action item. Mr. Spencer came out to explain things, and I'm glad everybody else got to hear it. And I think we'll probably look at this closer with a fine-tooth comb, maybe even let our county attorney see it, and then we'll put it back on the agenda for a possible action item to see if we want to join your cause.
Can you send that out, post that on the commissioner's website or message thing
Is that,
that Casey sends out?
you know if that's possible, Casey?
Attach it to the agenda?
The
Look at
order.
it So other people can look at it.
Yeah, I can.
We could, since my attachment didn't work, we could probably rescan this maybe.
Yeah.
And,
One here.
And do you know how to do it, or does Tim know how to put it on the county website?
Just make sure you make it clear that it's a draft.
Right, and it says that right at the top here, too.
Well, which one is that?
Yeah, well,
Thanks.
you know how to get on the website and look at that? I don't know how, do you know how?
Well, I get information about the meetings, so I was wondering
She
if
could
she
just
could go
send
down
it out
there.
to the whoever.
Oh, just mass distribute it that way?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that possible too? Not too much data? Okay. All right, well, we'll do that way then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stan,
Thank
for
you.
coming out,
Yes.
yeah.
I appreciate your time.
Lake, and the other one ran over, but we're here for the 11 o'clock scheduled, now 11:15, the revolving loan fund request for approval. So Emily, do we have enough people here for
I
the
believe so.
decision? Okay.
Yeah, the only one, I did receive an email from Mary, I guess that Claudia is sick and Dawn's on vacation, so she's not able to
Oh.
meet us today.
Okay,
She said, if you need the vote from me, you can call and I will say yes. I approve the change to Western Montana Specialty Foods Inc. to modify our loan, and I also approve Ready Food Trucking for $70,000 if the funds are available. So that was Mary's input. I guess I'll kind of start off by saying thanks for meeting with me today. And first, I'd like to go over the satisfaction of mortgage you have in front of you. Back in 2016, actually, BJM had paid off her loan from the county, and that was kind of in the transition period with Kevin and whatnot. I was unaware that we had a lien on her property, and so it was brought to my attention yesterday, so that's kind of a last minute
Oh, good.
entry in there, so it's just, I need a signature
okay.
for that so that I can get her the paperwork to
Okay.
release that lien.
So we're all done with her then?
Yep.
Good.
Cool.
And then, so, next would be, we'll go ahead and go through Mary Ipish's loan for
Okay.
Western Montana Specialty Foods. She's interested, she wants to try to get a deferred payment on her original loan. She's got two of them with us right now. And she wants to pay off the second one. So she wants the deferred payments on the first one, interest will still accrue. And then she'll be able to make $1,000 payments and pay off the second loan in about 5.5 months. She'll make that final payment, and the remaining money from that $1,000 payment will go towards the first loan, and then she'll continue to make $1,000 payments on that loan until paid off.
And how much time did she have on the second loan? It sounds like she's gonna try to double up on that by,
Right.
Or-
You
or
know,
so.
the origination, I believe, was in 2015.
Okay.
It was just right before I got here.
but she's gonna finish that one up early then?
Yes.
Yeah, by
Yes.
doubling up and then we're gonna.
Yeah,
Okay.
these were both due, they would have been payable through 2020.
20, okay.
Yeah,
Any issues with payment or,
never.
yeah, I didn't.
No, she's always on time with them.
Okay, so we're kind of shuffling her payment plan, no new monies.
Yeah, no new money going out to her,
Okay.
just that deferment, and then the interest will still be accrued on
Okay.
it, so we won't be losing any money, basically just helping her pay off a little earlier and
So with
Cut
her
back some of that
timely,
interest.
timely payments and whatnot, your recommendation is that this is,
yeah, a good move.
Okay.
For both the county and for Mary.
Do you want a motion?
oh, I think we're ready, huh?
I'd move that we allow her the deferment so she can pay the one off and then continue on the second loan.
I second that motion.
Okay, motion been made by Mr. Debris, seconded by Mr. Simons to approve the request for her loan modification to Western Montana Specialty Foods Incorporated. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you. All right, and then, has everybody had a chance to kind of look over the application from Verde Creek Trucking?
I skimmed it, but basically, because we already gave him a loan before, right?
We did last year, and he paid it off in full. So I believe that he's kind of in the same situation as before. He's kind of waiting for payment from the Forest Service on some stuff that he's finished up. He's purchased the truck and, the Peterbilt truck, and he's wanting to redo that truck to use on both the fires and logging.
What, refresh my memory, what was the one that you said he paid off? What was that total amount?
It was a big trailer, wasn't it?
That total amount was 44.
Yeah.
44,000?
44,000, yeah.
And now he'd like to have 70.
Yes, he'd like to have 70. And then he will make annual payments on it, so he'll just make one payment a year.
Oh, and then that's listed in the back. What,
Yeah, it's on the back, there's an amortization schedule with that.
what does that do to our total fund balance then if we were to approve this?
If we approve it, it takes it down to 3,538. Yeah. I mean, as far as total fund, that gives us with a $150,000 cushion. So,
So the
there
cushion's
is
still there.
Yeah, the cushion is still there. It's not going into that amount at all. So we still have 3,500 approximately that we could loan out at that point. And then that's also contingent on the 174,900 that's allocated for Superior Meats if that CDBG goes through. So if that CDBG does not go through, which I have not heard anything on to date, then we would still have that 75,000 that's allocated for the labor for that. So
Plus-
right now our total available amount to loan is 248,438 without the Superior Meats things going through.
How long does it take so put it down to 3,500 if we went with the 70,000? How
So-
long does it take to replenish that to where it's?
It just kind of depends. If people pay
Where
off.
would you be in a year?
That I'm not sure off the top of my head. Kind of depending on with payments and whatnot, I'd have to go through and see where those payment amounts would bring us up to, and I can definitely get that information to you if you guys would like to know. Like last year, I believe that we were anticipating 58,000 a year with principal and interest payments. So, I mean, it builds back up rather quickly.
Yeah.
As long as everybody makes payments, and then if we're lucky enough, like last year, we had 2 different loans that were paid off ahead of schedule, which with Mary's, that's 6,000 right back into the fund within 5 months. So, it does build up rather quickly as long as everybody's making their payments. Obviously with, Kevin, I really feel that he's able to make those payments back to us with no problem. I don't see a issue with him not being able to ever pay back.
And would we get interest on that too?
Yes, we do. Yep. 6%.
That, is he gonna be able, since it's annual, I mean, his setup is gonna be, you confident he's gonna be able to pay 16,777 every year in
Yeah.
one fell swoop?
Yeah.
How come he doesn't wanna do the monthly one, do you know?
I do not know. I had set it up that way at first, and he asked if he could do the annual, and I told him, I would bring it to the board and see what they said. The payment would have been $1,300 a month had he went monthly. Interest-wise, it was pretty close to the same. I think this way we actually get a little bit more than we would if he was making those monthly payments for interest-wise.
I think the nature of the work is seasonal, it has its ups and downs, and there could be droughts, there could be spells where there's not as much work
Right,
in that field.
right.
And I think being an Aggie too, agriculture is kind of annual. Calf, wean, sell,
Yeah.
etc.
Are there, do we know of any other people who are interested in
just
tapping
ask
in?
that.
Okay, I was gonna, or anybody who's applying, because I just,
I've had probably about 8 inquiries since the beginning of the year. Nobody has got back with any kind of paperwork. It's kind of standard. Last year it was the same way. You have everybody at the beginning of the year, they're gung-ho, they're ready to begin a business or to, get the funding to try to expand or capitalize on some things, and then they just kind of don't follow through. And so I actually, at this time, I have not received any other applications other than this one.
okay.
Did the resort district inquire? St. Regis Resort District?
Not from the revolving loan fund, no.
Okay, is there another fund available that they would be interested in?
I think that they would be going more for like a grant, a CDBG.
Planning grant.
Yeah, and they, I believe, have already submitted that planning grant
Oh, okay.
last year.
Okay.
They're still waiting on approval as well. But yeah, other than that, I haven't received any actual paperwork from anybody.
Yeah, because that was something, if we've got two or
Yeah, well,
three
that's if
pretty
we've got
good,
some that are.
yeah, who are
that are
waiting
waiting,
or might be
or-
good investments.
Right.
That would play into the decision, I think.
What if,
And-
given that concern that we may not have enough money to help somebody who's a first-time applicant, what about maybe just loaning part of the money on one of the collaterals, and he still has the other one for collateral, go to a regular bank?
I could recommend that to him if that's something you guys would like to do.
So instead of 70, we could maybe just loan him 35 or 40? I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to leave a little bit of buffer
Yeah,
for.
I just don't want to deplete it clear down and then have somebody come in that, you know, could really use it. to
But that is
get
what it's there
something
for,
going.
and he has an application in.
Mhm.
I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
You wonder though, I mean, or if he even would reconsider monthly. I know, like we said, it's, because his first payment wouldn't be until April of 19.
Right.
Because I'm thinking if he was paying like $1,300 a month, that would be between now and
be replenished.
money that's coming in, so that if
Mhm.
somebody wants just a $2,500 for something, it would be available. I wonder if he, and maybe, like you said, he gets this big payment from the Forest Service who went through this
Right.
last year with him, and that might be what he's tailoring it around, and it's a
Right, and so
good
this,
reason to do it.
this amortization was just from the date that he did, so, you know, I mean, the payment dates aren't necessarily, it might be something that he would make his first payment in December
Oh,
of
okay.
2018,
Okay.
and then go on through there. It's just been, you know, when I did the paperwork
Sure.
annually, that's where it puts the payment. So, I
Okay.
mean, really, it would, he could possibly be making that first payment in
Well, we did-
2018, I'm not really
He would be
sure
making
what
more
the-
money on the interest, the way he got it set.
Right, how he has it now.
Yeah.
So, and he's a good risk. We
Yeah.
know he's a good risk.
The other
So-
aspect to our, kind of our revolving loan fund is, you know, kind of helping economically jobs. Does he anticipate employing other people, or just kind of a
I believe he does employ other people.
financial thing he needs to have done?
Probably should. but-
Yeah, so it looks like he's gonna hire one full-time employee, is what it looks like on his paperwork. It's on the general information under the first page of his application.
Yeah, I think it is I mean, that's a good point, Dwayne. He's got his application in, he paid off his loan before, he's a good risk, and we don't have anybody waiting, so you'd almost hate to not
Not do it.
do it, because we then make money off that money. And then if somebody comes in 3 months and has a great plan, we might not be able to help them as much, but we're gonna have, like you mentioned, we're gonna have, Miss Ipich is gonna have paid off one of her loans to the tune of what, 6,000 in the next
6,000.
6 months, 5 months?
Yep, 5.5 months, yep.
So that puts us up to 10,000, plus whatever other people's loans are paying.
Right.
And
Which
if he
we have
makes-
5 other active ones.
Right, and then if he makes a payment early, I mean, if he ends up starting in December, that's 16, that's a nice little windfall.
Yeah. I make a motion that we approve the $70,000 loan to Birdie Creek Trucking.
I'll
I'd second
that.
it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Who wants credit for the second?
I'll yield.
Okay.
I'll yield the butte.
We have a motion by Commissioner Simon, the second by County Attorney Ellen Donahue to approve the Birdie Creek Trucking application loan for $70,000. Is there any further discussion before we vote? Questions, concerns? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right.
Okay, that's all I have for today.
This is always
So,
exciting
thank you
meetings
so
to
much.
see stuff going on, that's good.
Yeah, I think that's,
We're a little late, 1:04 for the 1 o'clock public comment, and We have the ever organized and ever informative Mr. Kepke here today.
Well, first off, do you have any questions about what's going on lately in St. Regis? I can't think of anything really noteworthy. You saw in the paper that we did that little visit with George Bailey and the solar power people.
Yeah.
And looked at the facility there.
How'd that go?
It was pretty interesting, it really. Talked about setting up, I haven't read the article, I didn't even read the paper yet, I just saw the paper. Do some small solar farms, or whatever they're called, around the edges of St. Regis on private land, close to the infrastructure, and feed it into the grid. And it's called, the term they used was a microgrid. We could generate, and with state-of-the-art batteries, banks of batteries, generate and store enough energy to keep on hand around St. Regis to run things. If the power goes out, it would keep things lit for a few hours. It wouldn't be enough to help the mill, because they draw so much.
Oh, yeah.
But there's options down the road for the mill to get in the more renewable energy and stuff too. So it's partly to have backup energy for the community, and I guess just to get some more juice into the system to help the bigger picture, those kinds of things. And it would be a combination of maybe not so much manufacturing of the solar components. It'd be assembly. There's a company in Charlotte that builds components that put the solar things all together, like racks and things.
Oh.
So the panels themselves come from overseas, mostly, because they're cheaper.
That was before the tariff.
Well, yeah, true. They'll be equalizing pretty things. But anyway, they specialize in fabricating racks and things to situate all these panels. It's a new startup business. So they're looking to have enough space to administer the solar program, to have training of people in those fields, maybe have some assembly training and things like that.
I gotta go, guys.
And try to make it an employer. Make this microgrid an employer of a few people. Now, I got an unrelated question before he leaves real quick. I went by Tricon, the old Tricon post and pole that Western Rec was using. Yeah, at the mill.
Yeah,
Do they
yeah.
still,
I think they still own that.
Burley still has that piece?
No, I think they sold that with, you could ask Tim, but I remember Tim saying they were eyeballing it.
IFG?
Yeah.
Oh, they were?
I believe IFG purchased it.
Okay, 'cause
I'm not positive.
Between there and the pellet plant, the old log yard is for sale. There's for sale signs out there. And it's a realtor I didn't recognize, not local.
Huh?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Okay, I'll ask Tim.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Let's see. Took a little drive around, springtime and the snow melts, you drive around and look at the clutter, decay, and blight everywhere, right? It always looks worse this time of the year before the weeds cover it up.
Yeah.
The wrecking yard out here at Mullen Road West, Mellons. I recall years ago there was a discussion about having some kind of a screening, a fencing, some kind of a system to fence that in per state
law
about wrecking yards. Well, it's really gone to hell, frankly. They've got cars stacked on top of cars, like they're trying to make it more visible by stacking them up vertically now. And that whole operation is just out of control. What can be done to rein those people in?
So if you're going to talk to Tim about the realty question, he'd know about that law.
Has anybody else brought this up?
You're the first one that I've heard since I've been here.
It really jumps out.
Yeah.
Really, I think it just jumps out. Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of other eyesores in the county, but,
Yeah.
you know, like Pruitt's, I guess there's
Yeah.
still no movement on that. Interesting thing I saw, when I went out past the old mill site. I went past McGowan's to the end of the blacktop, and there's a turnaround there.
Mhm.
Looks right over the creek.
County maintenance ends here.
Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of dump truck loads of what looks like road sanding material and pine needles, like had been scraped up, swept up from someplace. There's a whole bunch of it, just nice, neat dump piles there along the edge of that turnaround. And I can't imagine who did that or where it came from. Couldn't.
The state highway department has the maintenance on that. You know, they sand it and they
To the
plow
end
it.
of the blacktop.
Yeah.
It just was an odd looking material. It was almost like soil, but it had a lot of small gravel and pine needles mixed in with it. I just couldn't visualize where that came from. Oh, well.
I said it was the highway department. I'm dumping their little vacuum thing. Didn't look like that kind of material in it, but the pine needle was kind of weird.
I know, it's a lot of needles.
Because I know they do some at select interchange off ramps, they'll dump it.
Right, and that's usually pretty relatively clean, reusable sand and gravel. It's good for patching potholes in our driveways.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
And then I've got a buddy, I've mentioned this before, and I probably answered it. He's a retired FAA former airport manager. He's in our neighborhood at St. Regis, and he was curious if is there a paid airport manager for Mineral County? Or is it just a volunteer airport board?
As far as I know, it's just the airport board and any management of it, kind of like Chairman Steve Temple and the board decides.
I thought Steve was chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about that.
Would your friend be interested in being on the board, you think?
Not much of a meetings guy.
I think they're are they quarterly, Casey? Do you remember how often?
I don't know.
I don't know if they meet terribly often, but, because Don Felstead was thinking about maybe not being on it anymore, so they might need a body if your friend's interested.
Okay, if it's only quarterly, he's still a licensed pilot, but he doesn't have a plane. He was going to, he had somebody who was gonna fly in to Missoula and let him use that plane a few times or something. Should I refer him to
Yeah, Steve Temple.
Steve Temple?
Yeah, and
Are
he'd
they
know.
around these days?
Yeah,
Yeah, I saw him yesterday.
he's actually the new Superior Fire Chief, and he said his office hours, or he'll be in the office Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Over here.
Yeah.
Okay, and then when he's off fly fishing, how do they get a hold of him to help with the fire?
Probably a cell phone, I don't know.
Well, I don't know if then the assistant chief would step in then, or what, so.
Who's the assistant?
Hmm?
Who is the assistant?
Calvin Berry, I think.
Oh,
I
yeah.
believe.
Yeah, okay. He's been around a while. All right.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll just refer him to Steve Temple. We're gonna be doing some planning later today for the candidate forum for the hospital board.
Oh, yeah.
5 challengers, 4 incumbents.
Wow, there's a lot of interest.
5 challengers are all EMTs.
Do we know what's at the root of that? A sudden interest?
Some kind of a rub, I don't know what it is. But anyway, a few of us volunteers will just be putting that together. Nonpartisan, just put it together. It'll be at the high
That'll be
school.
good.
At the
Good
multi-purpose room?
Multi-purpose,
Yeah.
Diane McGowan, Liz, Mary Jo, and I. I'm not sure what the format will be or who's gonna MC it or
Huh.
whatever.
Yeah, I have it written down in my book.
It's the 18th.
18th of April?
Yeah, Wednesday, 8th.
At the 6 or 7 at night?
I'm not sure of the time.
Mhm.
I'm sure,
Oh, are you? Okay.
I'll try to post it that night.
Then the Tea Party hosted the St. Regis School Board candidates Tuesday night and had a nice crowd there, 50 people or so.
And was that a debate or just a meet and greet thing?
More of a meet and greet. I didn't go.
Mhm.
Community Council is gonna host another one on the 30th. And I think Sharon Patterson was gonna help with that, and we're not sure what else,
Mhm.
how structured it'll be. Oh, and I think the school board, I think the West End might have a school board forum too. I think. So the local school board here and the hospital board will be all mail-in ballots.
Mhm.
Guess that's all I've got for now. I'll go upstairs and bug Tim.
Okay.
Haven't bugged him for a while.
What?
I talked to Dennis